We're a little bit early for Baptist time, but it'll still work. All right. Before we get started into any of it, so let's go ahead and pray. So before we do, are there any prayer requests that we can add to the list? I've got Irving, Josh, Miss Connie's family.
By the way, they all got down there.
To Tennessee?
Yes.
All right.
It took about 6 days, well, 4 days by boat to get cars down.
Yeah.
And then the one that could fly but had to stop for 4 days, he got down there.
Huh. All right. Man. Still good.
Praise God.
Yes, ma'am. Anybody got anything else? Oh, yeah. I guess you are traveling tomorrow. Anybody else? Oh, yes, ma'am. Jean.
Just thanks and praise that one of my dead trees fell and it didn't get shed.
Yes, ma'am.
Save you some money.
Yeah. All right. Morning. All right. All right. Well, let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll jump into the thing we have today. All right. So let's pray together. And Lord, thank you so much for all that you do for us, for allowing us to be here today. This time of fellowship, Lord, and this time that you're going to give us the word today. You with the preacher as he brings it to us, and let that thing that's going on, Lord, heal it miraculously so that you get the glory for it. Be with Irving's grandson, Josh, and his health issues of salvation. May you be honored through it all. And thank you, Lord, for Miss Connie's family making it down there. Please be with them anyway. And through all this time they're going through, comfort them, be with them. And for Jeannie and for the shed and the tree, you're in control of all that too. So thank you so much for not letting it be anything disastrous for them. And for the travel we have tomorrow, Tristan was asking for prayer for travel, and I agree. I would ask the Lord also specifically for Jackie. She was sick last night, so just be with her today and throughout the rest of the day. And then, Lord, if you would, be with all the information that we're going to present today. Let it be an honor to you, and get me out of the way. In Jesus' name we ask it all. Amen. All right, so today is our Sunday school for, I even got the date right, 2024. This is the first time I got to do this one. Yeah, sorry I hadn't missed me last week. And on that note, I didn't write this down, but it got me thinking some of the stuff that I bring up here, it takes me a little bit to get it all ready. So I don't want to present any information that's not completely true and accurate, and it does take a little bit. So when we travel, it runs into the time. I need a couple days to actually do it all. Anyway, thank Jimmy that he was here and could do this, and he's gone today, so I think his class is in here. So, yeah, look at y'all. But anyway, all right, let's get going, and we'll see what we got today. So, as normally, I will give you the verse that I want to focus on kind of for Sunday school. It's sanctify the Lord God in your heart. And be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks you the reason of hope that is in you with meekness and fear. It's 1 Peter 3:15. And the concept behind that, we want to give all the information that we can to another, but we want to do it in love. We want to do it correctly. We want to have all the information there. That's what I'm going to try to do, is give you some more information, more ammunition, just so that you can do those kinds of things. One of the things that I like to do to give us all ammunition is creation. All right, that's what we're going to do today. So, it's going to do mostly creation. So, this is the animal that we're going to do today, or the creature that we're going to do today. And there it is. You pick it out? Huh? Where you see an octopus at? What? You don't see it, so you're just throwing it out there? It's not an octopus. That one's kind of hard. All right, so let's give you a better picture. How about that? What? Quit just throwing stuff out there. Pick it out, yeah. What? That is a clownfish. But that's not what we're going to talk about. How about now? Can you see them? You see it? I see a turtle. But guess what? That's not what we're talking about. We're going to talk about this. Look at everybody knew exactly what we're going to talk about. And it is coral. All right. Very good. So coral, that little word up there, whatever, anthozoa. The question that's most often asked when we talk about coral is it a plant? Or is it an animal? There's a picture of that. So which one is it? Animal. Plant, animal, both? Maybe both. There are two main types of coral that we're going to study. I mean, we're not going to study both types, but there's two main types. There's more than this. First one that we're going to talk, or not talk about, but is the soft coral. So that includes like sea anemones. That's the word you're trying to say. Sea anemones and other things like that, the soft corals. And then there's another type that's called the stony corals. It's the Scleractinia. And that's what we're going to be focused on mostly, is the stony coral type. So again, for those stony corals, would you think that's an animal or a plant? What? It can't be both. But that's a pretty good guess, though. Yeah. It's a what? Are plants not living things? All right. All right, that's enough. So, coral, it actually is an animal. Coral is an animal. If you want to study it, it's a marine invertebrate, meaning that it lives in the salt water, and invertebrate, it doesn't have a backbone, obviously. So that's what coral is. It's a marine invertebrate, and it is an animal. Along the animal lines, it's in this little group that they want to call the cnidarians. Does anybody have any idea what a cnidarian is? Any of the other ones? All right. A cnidarian is also a jellyfish. So it's in the same little phylum as jellyfish. And it's in the same little one as freshwater hydras. And it's not like the hydra that you hear about in Greek mythology. But there is an actual hydra that is alive today. And it has like tentacles. It's a small creature. It's only about 1/4 of an inch long. It's got tentacles, but if you cut off a tentacle, it will regrow them. Not two like you hear in the mythology, not like that. But it does regrow one thing if you cut it off. And the jellyfish and the hydra and the coral, they all have this similarity about them. They're in the same little phylum there, so they have what's called a polyp, and that's basically the body, the polyp. They have a mouth, and they have a digestive cavity, okay? All of them do that. And not only that, they all have the capacity to sting. Kind of crazy, but coral and jellyfish, obviously, hydra, they can all sting. And that's what they have, so, okay? So, one thing about it being an animal, this is kind of crazy, but coral is a predator. I know, but it really is a predator. And the way that it does it is it's got those, like I said, stinging, it's got little bitty tentacles. You can't really see it when you look at coral because they're pretty small. But the things that it eats are like little crustaceans, little tiny ones, almost microscopic. They're small little things and they float around. And the coral uses the tentacles and it'll sting them and bring them in through its mouth and eat them. And the way that the coral grows too, it grows out, obviously, but the growth of it is like it grows another mouth, basically, is what it does. It grows more and more mouths. And that's basically how it does. But the things that it eats, the crustaceans, they provide it with protein. One thing that it does not get when it eats all those crustaceans is carbohydrates or sugars, okay? It doesn't get this. So it runs into a little bit of an issue. How does coral get carbohydrates or sugars? And that you need sugar to energize everything. So where does it get it from? Beyond being a predator, it's also a symbiote, all right? So the way that a symbiote works, or a symbiosis, it's two separate entities, okay? and they live together for a mutual advantage, basically. That's what it does. So the coral does this symbiotic relationship, and what it does with is algae. The way that it works is the algae gets a place to stay, all right? That's its bonus for living on the coral. The coral has the algae that it farms, and the algae will give off a carbohydrate. And so the coral actually gets carbohydrates from the algae, and that's the way that it continues to grow. And that's not all the algae does, so carbs, that's what I was saying, it gets carbs from it, but it also gives the color to it, which is kind of neat. If you look at the picture up there, you'll see that the coral has all these amazing colors on it. And the reason why coral is actually a dull brown color, so it's not very nice looking, but when it gets the algae on it, the different types of algae give it the different colors. So each coral that you see up there, each different one, has a different algae on it, which gives off a different color. That's basically where the color comes from, is the algae that lives on it. So, yeah, and that's how coral works. So it preys on little species like that. Let's see, where in the end? Okay, yeah, well, that's all right. So coral, though, and we often will say coral reef, but those two things are not actually the same thing. Coral is the animal, okay? The animal that lives out there and eats little crustaceans and lives with algae. The coral reef is not the coral. The coral reef is actually what it is, skeletal remains of coral. So when coral dies, when it dies, it leaves behind like a skeleton, and as it grows farther and farther, it just grows farther away from its skeletal remains. So what do we have that we see and then we call a coral reef is actually dead coral, okay? That's basically what it is. And on top of that, so the coral lives where it lives in the ocean, and the skeletal remains live in the ocean, so you'd obviously think that there would be plenty of fossils of coral around, right? Because that's just where it is. It dies out there in the water, and a bunch of skeletons, so the coral reef produces lots of fossils, right? Well, actually, no, it doesn't. There are virtually no fossils of coral in the entire world. Hardly any at all, which is kind of a neat thing for us, but for an evolutionist, that makes it a little bit tough because they have to come up with an idea about how did the coral get here. And that's what I was going to show you right now. And all of these quotes that I'm going to give you, I think there's only 2 or 3. But anyway, I don't change the quote at all. It's exactly, I just cut and paste it. This is exactly what they said, okay? When they're talking about coral. There's little evidence on which to base a hypothesis about the origin of the sclerotinians. This is a big, pretty word for coral. About the origin of the coral. Plenty is known about modern species, but very little about fossil specimens, which first appeared in the record in the Middle Triassic, 240 million years ago. But we don't know, there is little evidence, but there's enough evidence to know that it first appeared in the Middle Triassic. There's enough evidence to know that, right? I don't know, but they willingly admitted there is little evidence. All right, in that same article, which, I was reading it, farther down, much farther down, separated greatly, as they say, stony corals first appeared in the Middle Triassic, cool, but their relationship to the tabulate and rugose corals of the Paleozoic is currently unresolved, all right? So they're trying to match these two up. The tabulate and the rugose corals are actually both extinct. They're not even here anymore. And so their issue is they have these 2 extinct corals that they think are extinct or whatever, but trying to figure it out, it's currently unresolved, okay? There's little evidence, and that little evidence that they do have is currently unresolved, even though they're extinct. But anyway, that's basically what they say. And like I said, these are not like one right after the other. These are separated with a huge portion in between. So they don't want you to know. That's pretty much what they said. We don't know anything. A little bit farther after that one, it says, in modern times, Stony coral's numbers are expected to decline due to the effects of global warming and ocean acidification. All right? And I did this for you, so you don't have to do it, unless you just want to. Those little blue lines, or where it's blue, you can click on it and it'll go to another link and I'll show you what it means. So I clicked on that first one that said global warming. I was like, okay, what are you gonna tell me about that? And it doesn't go to global warming. Where it goes to is climate change, obviously. But, I'll get to that one in a second. And then the next one is ocean acidification. So I had to click on that one too. I was like, okay, what does that mean? Ocean acidification, ongoing decrease in the pH of the Earth's ocean from 1950 to 2020, 70 years. The average pH of the ocean surface fell from approximately 8.15 to 8.05. So in 70 years, it changed 0.1 pH on the ocean surface, approximately 0.15, 0.1, approximately. But they don't tell you what ocean that they took that from. Okay, there's not much ocean out there, or is there? And they don't tell you what section of the surface they took that from. But anyway, whatever section of that surface of whatever ocean, it's approximately 0.1 difference in pH over 70 years. Me thinking about that, that sounds amazingly stable. But anyway, I'll go. And we're not going to go too far into that one. I want to do the global warming. Well, yeah, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Global warming, and I clicked on it, like I said, it goes immediately to climate change. So apparently it's not called global warming anymore. It's called climate change, if you didn't know. And I guess the betters that are our representatives will tell us the climate change, the human climate change is causing the decline in stony coral. If you didn't know, they were letting us know that we live on Earth and it has a climate and it changes. If you didn't know, that's your tax dollars hard at work, by the way. That's what they wanted you to know. And apparently it kills coral. Anyway, all right, does anybody know what that little picture is of that area? It is blue water on top of it. This is actually the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, all right? So that's what that whole place is. It's kind of, that picture doesn't do it quite the justice, but they didn't give me a whole picture of it. Anyhow, it stretches out pretty big. The Great Barrier Reef, because of where it is and what it is, like I was saying earlier, you can get that skeleton and they can actually observe how much the coral grows per year based on the skeletons that we just saw. So it's a scientifically measured data. So what it is you get the coral and it's dead, and that's what we can study or learn about or measure. So you get all these skeletal remains and then this portion of coral over here that's still alive, and they can study it. So in 10 years it was this big, 20, 30, and they actually measure that pretty accurately. So the coral grows at a certain rate every year, and you can extrapolate that back by knowing how much it grows per year to see how big and how old actually the Great Barrier Reef is. And it's a scientific measurement, so it's pretty cool. Does anybody have any idea how old the Great Barrier Reef is? It's close. Anybody got any idea? Yeah, close. But using the actual scientific measurement, they can determine that the coral reef around the Great Barrier Reef is 4,300 years old, or approximately 4,300 years old. Does anybody have any idea what might have happened 4,300 years ago? Yes. Yes.
I was reading something, this is like 10 years ago, so I don't remember all the details.
Okay.
But supposedly coral growth rates have fallen significantly in the last 100 years, so how would that even still apply? Would they still say any kind of age business?
How could they? I don't know.
Growth rates is increasing and then dropping.
Yep. Could be that the growth rate is increasing and dropping. And if you actually look up and try to find out this number that I have right here on any site that's Wikipedia or whatever, they'll tell you that it's between 6,000 and 20,000 years. The reason that they do that is because they can't have this number because if they 4,300 years, what happened 4,300 years ago? Flood. Destroyed everything, including all the coral reef, and when that stuff started to grow back, that's why I said approximately 4,300, it may be 4,200, it doesn't matter. Point being, if it's 4,300 years, which it is, and we can measure it, get pretty close, that means that there was a flood, and it did destroy everything, and that if there was a flood, then there was a God who sent that flood and judged the earth because of the earth's wickedness. And they can't have that. If you're an evolutionist, you can't have God, because then you'll be accountable to him. Don't want to have any of that stuff going on. But anyway, that's what it is. 4,300, approximately 4,300. And yes, the growth rates, you'll find, like I said, all kinds of different numbers, 20,000 to 6,000. They won't use the 4,300 because they know that coincides with the biblical flood. Point of all of that, though, is what I always wanted to say about the end of it, is the Bible is always right. Always right. It doesn't matter what it is, what's going on. There is no contradiction in the Bible. There's no error in the Bible. There's no confusion in the Bible. God wrote the Bible, and he wrote it perfectly, and he wrote it for all of us. One of those things that we wrote, we're going to talk about right here in a second. The Bible's always right. So, on the issue of coral, though, do we have any questions immediately about coral?
How do they measure how old?
Do what? Do what? I'm sorry.
How do they measure how old that coral reef is?
You can take the skeletons of the coral, the stuff that's died, and then the stuff that's still alive. So they measure it every 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years actually. They've measured it for quite a long time. And then determine after that period of time, okay, it grew this much in 40 years, in 30 years, and 20 years, and they are all equal pretty well. So that means that, okay, if we know it grows that much in 40 years or 30 years, then we can take that and know how much it grows in 1 year. So if we take how big the coral is and then determine, okay, if it grows this much and it's this big, then that means it must be this old. Does that make sense? No? All right. Do what?
You're just saying they just kept on measuring it and they took this much per year.
That's all they had to do. I mean, it's not like a big measurement thing. It's just what's alive and what's dead and measure the two. And then it's like, okay, well, it has to grow this much per year.
It doesn't matter because you're not going to believe the Bible's the word of God. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you don't want to believe it, then okay. Even though the scientific data that they want to use, you always trust the science. The scientific data says that's how old it is, but don't want to have that anyway. So, do you have a question, Miss Dawn? I'm sorry. Okay. I don't remember either. Go ahead.
Is there any of the, those corals where what it is like an old train car or anything just falls into the water and then coral falls
Yep.
around it? Is there any bigger?
Not the Great Barrier Reef, but there are instances of that, especially in the Red Sea. If you look at the crossing of the Red Sea and you'll see coral growing on that stuff. It's like, how does coral grow without a hard surface? It doesn't really grow on sand, and it's a hard surface. So you will see it in areas that have something hard. So for the Red Sea crossing, you'll see that the coral is growing on things that were hard. And if you look at the shape of those things, they look like chariot wheels and things like that. So it's kind of obvious. But anyway. All right. Any more questions? All right, good. All right. So we're going to do the next thing. I said the Bible's always right. And going from that, we're going to do something in the Bible. So if you would, turn to Job chapter 41, and we'll do some more Bible stuff. And this is a creation-based biblical study. So in Job 41, still her pages turning about there. All right, good. Job chapter 41 and verse 1 says, "Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down?" Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Yes, you can, because he's right up there. And if you didn't know, no, biblical thing. Whoever that guy is my wife's first husband, and she's not here. So it was going to be good just to show. And yeah, she got sick last night, and whatever. Yeah, because I was going to ask her, how big was that thing? And she would say, oh, I think it was 80 pounds, and it was close to 80. It was 77.9. And I was able to say, all right, well, later on, when you're older and you can't remember, you're going to say something like 100 pounds. And then I get to go, yes, that's exactly what it was, 100 pounds. Now, it was a big one, though. And I wanted to mount that thing, and this is the verse that I wanted to use. You can't, mount halibut, but you mount the tail. And I was going to mount the tail and put this verse, canst thou draw the Leviathan with a hook, underneath that. But it didn't work. Anyhow, all right. So anyway, Job chapter 41, and we'll go through it. It's a description of this creature. Canst thou draw the Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put an hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? Wilt thou play with him as with a bird? Or wilt thou bind him for thy maidens? Shall the companions make a banquet of him? Shall they part him among the merchants? Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears? Lay thine hand upon him. Remember the battle. Do no more. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down, even at the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? This is God speaking. Who hath prevented me, that I should repay him? Whatsoever is under the whole heaven is mine. I will not conceal his parts, nor his power, nor his comely proportion. Who can discover the face of his garment? Or who can come to him with his double bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. His scales are as pride, shut up together as with a close seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They stick together that they cannot be sundered. By his neesings, that's an old word for sneezing, by his neesings, a light doth shine, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. I'm going to stop right there and ask you, eyes like the eyelids of the morning. Has anybody got any idea what the eyelids in the morning, what that means? Huh? Yeah, I think so too. So if you've ever watched the sunrise and watched the sun come up over the horizon, if you look at the end of the horizon, watch the sun come up, you will see the darkness start to fade up like an eyelid opening, and the sun makes this little circle like when it's coming up over the horizon. So if you look at it, it's almost like the eyelid of the morning as the sun arises, which is an awesome thing, which is a great way to describe this too. His eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Awesome. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. In his neck remaineth strength, and sorrow is turned to joy before him. The flakes of his flesh are joined together. They are firm in themselves, they cannot be moved. His heart is as firm as a stone, yea, as hard as a piece of the nether millstone. When he raises up himself, the mighty are afraid. By reason of breakings, they purify themselves. The sword of him that layeth at him cannot hold, the spear, the dart, nor the habergeon. He esteemeth iron as straw, and brass as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones are turned with him into stubble. Darts are counted as stubble. He laugheth at the shaking of a spear. Sharp stones are under him. He spreadeth sharp-pointed things upon the mire. He maketh the deep to boil like a pot. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. He maketh a path to shine after him. One would think the deep is to be hoary. Upon earth there is not his like, who is made without fear. He beholdeth all high things. He is a king over all the children of pride. Job chapter 41. I wanted to read the whole chapter because the whole chapter is about one creature. All right. There's a lot of detail in this description. If you see it right there, a lot of detail. Not only that, there's an extreme length to this. Job is the oldest completed book of the Bible. Any question or any argument? Job, the oldest completed book? All right. God takes an entire chapter of Job to describe Leviathan. He takes the whole chapter just to show you, this is what I want you to know about this creature. If God put it in here, you think it's important? Yeah. If God put it in there, and he used a whole chapter in the oldest book of the Bible, one of the first things that anybody read, Job chapter 41, they're like, Leviathan. Yeah, I've seen that thing because just earlier we saw when God was talking to Job, he said, behold down Behemoth. So turn around and look at him. The same thing is going to happen here with Leviathan. You could see him at that time. You could see this creature. So what is it? The identity of a Leviathan. Does anybody know what it is? Yes, ma'am. Water dinosaur, okay. Water dinosaur.
Dragon,
A what?
fire-breathing water dragon.
A fire-breathing water dragon. You said it's a fire-breathing dragon? What? That's a...
Loch Ness Monster.
Well, I don't know if he breathes fire, but he might. I don't know. Anyway, the identity of that creature, well, he's Leviathan. It could be a dinosaur that breathes fire. I don't know. What does the Bible say? For an entire chapter, for the whole chapter of Job 41, what does it say?
Something you don't want to tangle with.
That's true. That's exactly what it says. You don't want to mess with that thing. That is what it says. So anyway, I'm going to go through some of the characteristics. I'm going to try and keep this, I'm doing pretty good on time. All right, so he's smart. Verse 1, canst thou draw out Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? So immediately, when you see that, you think, can you bring him out with a hook? Talking about his size. I'm pretty sure that's not exactly what it's talking about. He's trying to say, can you make him come out of where he's hiding? Can you draw him out with a hook? Or can you bring his tongue out with a cord which you let down? You let down this thing, and you entice him to come towards it. But he's smarter than that. He's not going to be taken by a hook or a cord or whatever that you let down. So he's large too. Well, we already read about the large part. We're 1, 2 through 4. He's large and he's strong. Let's see. Can you put a hook into his nose or bear through his jaw with a thorn? Will he make many supplications unto thee or speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with him? Or you going to take his servant, take him as a servant forever? Yeah, right. And then verse 12 says, I will not conceal his parts, nor his power, nor his comely proportion. God's saying this thing is strong. He has a lot of power. Verse 22, in his neck remain his strength, and sorrow is turned into joy before him. His neck, the whole thing of that creature is strong. He has a lot of strength, and he is very large. All right. He can't be controlled. He can't be contained. Verse 5 and 6 says, wilt thou play with him as a bird, or wilt thou bind him for thy maidens? Shall the companions make a banquet of him? Shall they part him among the merchants? So they're saying, what are you going to do? Are you going to tie him up, and you're going to play with him like a bird? Are you going to tie him up for your maidens to come and play with? That's exactly what God's saying there. But you can't. You can't control him. You can't contain him. Verse 13, that's another one. Who can discover the face of his garment? Or who can come to him with his double bridle? You can't. A bridle is used to control a horse. Same thing with a Leviathan. You can't come to him with a bridle and try to contain him or try to control him. You can't do that. His skin. Yeah, verse 7. His skin. This is a little bit difficult. Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears? So, apparently, from the way that is written, his skin has sharp irons in it. I would actually say it's more like a harpoon. So he has these things in his skin that if you even try to come near it, either he can shoot them out or they're really sharp. And it's either on his skin, but it's also on his head.
Like quills?
Like what?
Like quills. Like
Oh, quills. I thought you said quails. I was like, no, not like quails, but quills. I would think it's even bigger than that, though. But yes, in the portion that they have stabby things that come out, I would think this thing has those giant stabby things, and I don't think they would come out like quills. I think they'd stay in the skin. So even if you did get near it and get poked, they're going to stay in there. I can't prove that, but that's kind of what I would think is the barbed irons, this head with fish spears. I mean, you can't come near that thing. Yes, ma'am. Do what?
On a tiny scale of that, we had a saltwater tank.
Oh, yeah.
A yellow tang,
Yeah.
and they look like they have white spots right on their tail,
Mhm.
but they're not. They're actually spears.
Yep.
And they use them to fight other tangs.
Yep.
And so,
For protection too.
yeah, so it's very easy to see that,
Mhm.
how it could have very well been.
Could have been, and not that it could have been. It was. Yeah. It's a difficult thing to understand completely because we don't have really anything alive today that we can compare to that. But
Thank goodness.
yeah. All right. Let's see. He's fearsome. Look at verse 8. Lay thine hand upon him. Remember the battle. Do no more. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. That means the hope of trying to overcome him. It's in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? So if you see him, you're going to be frightened to where you're cast down. None is so fierce that dare stir him up. There's nobody. Who then is able to stand before me? God speaking. Who's going to stand before me? I created that thing that everybody should be afraid of. He's fearsome. 25, 26. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. By reason of breakings, they purify themselves. The breaking of the water. Some people will say that purify themselves means they were beside themselves. I don't think that's what it means, but we'll just leave it at that. I think when you purify yourself, you're extracting any waste products. The sword of him that layeth at him cannot hold the spear, the dart, nor the habergeon. It doesn't matter what weapons you bring or what armor you bring. You can't stand next to a Leviathan. He's fearsome. He is impenetrable. Verses 15 through 18. His scales are his pride, shut up together as with a close seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They stick together. They cannot be sundered. 23 and 24. The flakes of his flesh are joined together. They are firm in themselves. They cannot be moved. His heart is as firm as stone, yea, as a hard as a piece of the nether millstone. So even got all these spears and all these sharpness that's coming out of the skin, but you can't even penetrate it. It doesn't matter what you use. His scales are so close together that air doesn't even get in between them. It's an amazing thing to think about what a creature this is. He's impenetrable. All right, so like we're saying, fire breathing. So if we go to verse 18 through 21, we can look at this. By his sneezings, like I said, that's a word for sneezing. A light doth shine. So when he sneezes, a light shines. Woo. His eyes are like the eyelids of the morning, which I explained a minute ago. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. That's pretty self-explanatory. Out of his mouth go burning lamps. Yeah, you could try and use that as a metaphor and say, oh, his mouth is just bright. And sparks of fire leap out. Explain that one to me. That's saying sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, out of his nose, as out of a seething pot or cauldron, a boiling pot. These smoke comes out of his nose. Why would smoke be coming out of his nose unless fire was coming out of his nose or fire was coming out of his mouth? All right. Verse 31, 32 also says, he maketh the deep to boil like a pot. Wow, how does he do that? He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. He maketh the path to shine after him. One would think the deep to be hoary. That's a word for hoary is like a curly white, more like a white, bubbling up. You could say that, okay, that as he goes, he's making it bubble up behind him. But if you see any fish or anything that runs off, it doesn't leave. It may leave a little bit of a trail, but it's gone. What they're saying right there is as he goes, this path that he leaves behind him is like white. He's making the deep to boil like a pot. He makes it boil. His fire that's going out of his mouth and the smoke and the sparks that are leaping out. There's no other way to describe that. There's no other way. They want to make this a metaphor so bad, but God said it perfectly clear. He breathes fire. That's what this says. Where do all the things in the Middle Ages when they have fire-breathing dragons and they try to block them with their shield or something goofy like that? We have all this stuff that we relate to now. We have all kinds of things to where it's a fire-breathing dragon. Where did that come from? Did somebody just come up with that on their own? No. Right here's where it came from. Right here. When they see, a Leviathan, people actually saw this creature. And Job for sure saw it. Because it was written in the book of Job with God speaking to Job for an entire chapter saying, Leviathan, he breathes fire, so you don't want to mess with him. And that's exactly what it was. All right, he breathes fire, and he's unbeatable. All right, 42, 27 through 30 says, he esteemeth iron as a straw, and brass as rotten wood. He just destroys anything at any time. The arrow cannot make him flee. You can fire whatever you want at him. He's not going to matter. Sling stones are turned with him into stubble. You can fire things at him, and it's nothing to him. Darts are counted as stubble. He laugheth at the shaking of a spear, which is an amazing thing. He just laughs at it. He's like, what are you doing? You can't beat me. Sharp stones are under him. He spreadeth sharp pointed things upon the mire. 33, 34. Upon earth there is not his like. What an amazingly strong statement from God Almighty. Can you see that? Wow. Upon earth there is not his like. Wow. Who is made without fear? He beholdeth all things. He is like a king. He is a king over all the children of pride. This creature that God made, you can't beat it. And all those things right there, there's nothing you can do about it. It's an amazing creature that God wanted us to know about. So he put it in the Bible for us to know about. So, back to the identity. The identity of this creature, it's a tough one. Because I don't really know anything today that will meet all those categories. Don't really see fire-breathing lizards today. And I do believe it was a lizard. It kind of looked like this. But I think that it was actually a little bit bigger than that, so I found another little bit picture. You could see, I think it was a little bit bigger than that. And this is a pretty good picture of how big it was, I think. That's a helicopter over there in the corner. I think it was around that size. I don't know for sure, all that stuff behind him is his tail. But anyway, there's something important missing about these two pictures. I had to find this thing on a Christian website, and I was like, all right, somebody finally believes it. So I think this would be more realistic. He's going to have those glowing eyes like the eyelids of the morning, breathing fire. You know, that's what I think Leviathan would kind of look like. Yeah, I would be more along that line. He's breathing fire, and you know, he's unscared of anything, and he's unbeatable. All right, so that's what I think the Leviathan is. So, yep. We got any questions about Leviathan that I could answer? Yes, ma'am.
No question, but also,
Good.
we do have cave drawings,
Yes, we do.
things like that of people who, way back, recorded pictures of these creatures,
Yeah.
and they're in stone, you know, and it's okay for us to look and say, okay, well, there was the little mammoth guy,
Mhm.
but, you know, the sea monster didn't exist. You know, that, you can't have one or the,
Yeah, no. And it's right there. It's written in stone, just like you said. No, I've seen them on their swords. They actually inscribe things on their swords that look like dinosaurs. And it's like, how did those guys see that? Because they were alive when they were there. So, yeah. Anyhow, all right, go ahead.
Did the Leviathan die before the flood, or did he die during the flood?
Neither. To answer your question, it would be after. That's a tough one because Job was written after the flood. And God was still writing about Leviathan. And you'll read it farther in the Bible, not farther, but later in the Bible, you read David speaking about Leviathan and how they divided him or something like that. But yeah, it's in Psalms, it's in other things. So yeah, it's after the flood. Good question. Go ahead, Nathan.
Wasn't there something in the wilderness that they slain or God slain that they ate or something?
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about too. Is that it wasn't? Based on what this says, is God killed it, and then they would use the meat from it, and that's why I think it was so big, is because it was feeding David and his entire army. So I mean, it'd have to be a pretty big creature to feed a whole army. So I think that's more along the lines of what it was. But yeah, they did kill him later, and I think God killed him. Anyway, we good? All right, so everybody knows what Leviathan is now. Okay, good. We've got, I went a little over again, sorry. But anyway, I guess we're doing choir, I don't know. Are we doing choir?
Yes.
All right, we're going to do choir next, and then, after that we'll have our service. So thank y'all for being here and listening to all this, and appreciate you. Yeah, let's take a break.